Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta is the latest province to sign an agreement in principle with the federal government on healthcare funding. We will explain for how much. Streets Alive held their biggest fundraiser of the year over the weekend. We have the numbers as to how much was raised for this Christian organization. And the Jesus Revolution is cleaning up at the box office. We have the details as to how popular this Christian movie has been with audiences so far.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta is the latest province to sign an agreement in principle with the federal government on healthcare funding. Ottawa says the more than $24 billion will be invested in Alberta's healthcare system over the next 10 years. That will include $2.9 billion for a new bilateral agreement focused on shared health priorities and an immediate top-up of $233 million to the Canada Health Transfer to address urgent needs. Alberta is the 7th province to sign on after the four Atlantic provinces, Ontario and Manitoba. The agreements in principle are a first step to completing the $196 billion 10-year healthcare funding proposal the Trudeau government made on February the 7th. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says the agreement in principle the province signed with Ottawa will help ensure that many issues in the healthcare industry will be addressed. Health Minister Jason Copping says a big focus for the government right now has been on surgical wait times, which he says are finally coming down.
The number of patients waiting longer for surgery than clinically recommended has dropped by 9.4% since November. As of November of last year, over 39,200 people were waiting too long for the surgeries they needed. As of last Monday, that number has been reduced to about 35,500. This is a remarkable decrease.
The provincial budget will be released late Tuesday afternoon. Now, there are a number of concerns that not enough money will be put into education. Jason Schilling is the president of the Alberta Teachers Association. He says funding is desperately needed right now.
I suspect that there probably will be money for education in the budget. The fact of the matter remains is that systemically, education has been underfunded for years. We need an influx of $1.2 billion in the budget tomorrow just to put us at the Canadian average of funding. That's a huge number. Education is far behind, and the government will have to step up with funding. And I'll also note that that funding needs to be consistent. It can't be just a one-year election cycle budget drop. This has to be a consistent budget funding endeavor that moves forward.
Now, Bridge City News reached out to Deputy Premier Nathan Neudorf's office for comment, and a spokesperson with the Neudorf camp said once the budget is released, the ATA and teachers should be happy with the news about the funding they will receive. The province is moving forward with tax breaks for oil and gas companies for meeting their legal obligations to clean up oil well sites. Now, the Liability Management Incentive Program would issue around $100 million in credits that companies could use to apply against royalties earned from new production. Credits would be earned by cleaning up well sites that have been inactive for at least 20 years. The opposition NDP say public money should not be given to oil companies to do work they're already obligated to do.
Danielle Smith herself has estimated it could cost Alberta $20 billion in royalty credits. That is almost the entire annual health budget. This $20 billion handout has faced widespread criticism, and rightly so. The president of the Rural Municipalities Association of Alberta said this is how a fox would design a henhouse. Scotiabank released a scathing report saying the plan would create negative public sentiment towards our oil and gas industry, and that it, quote, goes against the core capitalist principle that private companies should accept full responsibility for the liabilities they willingly accept.
Cyprus Medicinet independent MLA Drew Barnes echoed the sentiments of the official opposition. He says it is a bigger issue than we realize.
First of all, these oil and gas producers knew 100% that before they started to drill for these wells, that cleaning up after themselves was their responsibility, as it should be. And, that's been our system for years. So the fact that the UCP government is stepping in with Alberta families' tax dollars to help, reduce a cost that should be borne by these producers is absolutely wrong.
Well, it was good to see some sunshine and milder temperatures earlier today here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it's a lot nicer than the minus 35 to 40 with the wind chill we experienced last week.
Yeah, it sure is, Hal. And in fact, Lethbridge was actually the Alberta warm spot today. I say warm spot and not a hot spot because we still only reached 0.9 degrees, giving us that mildest temperature in all of Alberta. We didn't quite reach that high of 2 degrees like we were expecting. But as we get into this evening, we're seeing an overnight low of -9, going to feel more like -13 with that 40K wind. We're seeing some periods of snow beginning before morning and then into Tuesday. More flurries expected. We could actually see up to 2 centimeters on Tuesday and a high of -3 degrees. But after that, we're looking at mainly plus temperatures throughout the rest of the week. I'll be back later in the newscast to let you know all about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Streets Alive Mission raised around $65,000 this past weekend during the coldest night of the year fundraising event. Officials with the Christian organization said more funds are set to come in. Members of the community walked around the Lethbridge downtown core to raise money and show support for our most vulnerable. Staff from Streets Alive talked about how many walkers braved the cold for the very special event.
We had 162 walkers come out on the day of the event, 25 teams. We had everyone of all ages. There were people of all ages there out willing to take on the cold. We were a little concerned in the morning with the wind, but we got a little bit of a reprieve. It was still cold, but fortunately, we all had somewhere warm to go back to. So many people in our world don't have somewhere warm to go back to. All of these dollars go directly to people that are on the streets, to people that are hungry, to people that are hurting, and to people that are homeless. So each dollar has a life impact. It really does.
Woods Homes Lethbridge also took part in the coldest night of the year walk at Henderson Lake and raised just under $6,000 to put toward the emergency youth shelter here in the city. The historic Lethbridge Hotel is in the process of being demolished. This follows a fire that burned most of the building last Friday morning. Officials determined that due to the weak structural integrity of the building, it now has to come down. They also say the property was vacant at the time and the cause of the fire remains under investigation. Belinda Croson, the president of the Lethbridge Historical Society, says this is a huge loss for our community.
Both as an incredible historic building that stood over 120 years, but then also to the community itself who had memories of it. The buildings are the most tangible part of our history, right? When we see those buildings stand, we make the connections to it. So it's a loss to the heritage community, to a loss of a historic building, but it's also a loss to the owners and to everyone else. We're very happy to hear so far that no one was hurt in the incident, but we're devastated that we lost another historic building.
Yeah, thank goodness no one was hurt. Staff from the Galt Museum and Archive shared a little bit more of the history behind this iconic Lethbridge Hotel.
Various times it was the city government and I think Methodist church also did the first services from there. So yeah, it was like a Swiss knife for the various community events.
Lethbridge police are asking anyone who may have been driving in the area between 1:45 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. on Friday morning to check their dash cams for activity in the vicinity of the hotel. They're asking anyone who could help with the investigation to come forward and call them as soon as possible. Lethbridge police have charged two 22-year-old males with aggravated assault following a stabbing on Sunday. LPS were called to the NMAC Centre where the International Peace Powwow and Festival was taking place around 2 p.m. to deal with an unrelated matter when security came over to tell officers they just witnessed a stabbing. The victim was transported to hospital by EMS where he remains in critical condition. The culprits turned themselves into the Blood Tribe Police on Sunday evening. Dylan Jeremy Braverock of the Blood Reserve and Dalton Mark Oldshoes of Lethbridge face a wide range of charges, including aggravated assault and assault with a weapon. Both are currently in custody awaiting their bail hearings. Bridge City News reached out to the organizers of the powwow for comment on the story, but have yet to hear back. The stats are in for the 2023 Special Olympics Alberta Winter Games. It appears as though Team Lethbridge took home some nice hardware. A total of 24 athletes from our city participated in the event and won 3 gold medals in Strathcona County in Alberta, 1 for figure skating and 2 for 5-pin bowling. Officials for the event told us it was an amazing turnout.
It's just such a special moment to be there and experience it. We train through like a full school year. So Special Olympics runs from September, usually October, right up until June, depending on the sports. And just seeing how they improve, how their skill level changes, the friendships they build is a huge factor in this whole situation. And just the way that they can just come together, represent, and just have a passion for what they're wanting to do.
The floor hockey team from Lethbridge also took home a medal in the color of bronze.
I was not expecting like over 1,000 people there. I was not expecting like whatever. I was not expecting like that many people. I'm surprised people showed up there. I didn't know how many people was going to be showing up. I said, oh, this guy's came up, and this guy said, there's thousands of people here. I said, holy, it's enjoyable too and stuff. And you just go there and relax too.
It was a decent turnout. 2 silver medals were also awarded to the curlers and 1 for 5-pin bowling, and another bronze medal was dished out for 5-pin bowling as well. A Canadian trucker was in court answering to criminal charges in connection with the Freedom Convoy, which took place last February in our nation's capital. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is representing Guy Meister from Nova Scotia, who's charged with mischief and resisting or willfully obstructing police. John Carpe is the president of the Justice Centre, who joins us now from Calgary and has the latest on Mr. Meister's case. John, you and your team say his rights were violated?
So Guy Meister was one of thousands of Canadians peacefully exercising his charter rights and freedoms in February of 2022 in Ottawa, protesting against the mandatory vaccination policies. So these people were using their freedoms of speech and association and peaceful assembly. Guy Meister was suddenly arrested. There was a tactical unit with soldiers without ID numbers, with assault weapons, and circled his truck. They handcuffed him so tight that his fingers went numb, and he was then put onto an unheated vehicle without access to a lawyer or water or a bathroom or anything else for well over 2 hours. He was not permitted to see a lawyer or obtain legal advice. And the court proceedings are ongoing, and we're making the argument that he was arbitrarily detained, which is yet another charter violation.
Do you think this case could be precedent-setting, affecting the other cases being heard involving protesters from the Freedom Convoy?
Well, every case is precedent-setting to some extent. Certainly, the charter violations are not unique, unfortunately. We do have a right to speak to a lawyer when we're arrested, and police cannot just handcuff you for hours on end without access to a bathroom and drinking water, etc.
Thanks so much, John. That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Calgary. You know, there's been more talk coming out of China about a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. President Xi Jinping is allegedly telling his troops to be ready by the year 2027. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says with all of the financial and military support from the West going to Ukraine right now, the Chinese may strike even sooner.
I mean, if I were a crazy Chinese dictator, I would say you should invade Taiwan right now. Why? Because the Europeans and the United States, more than anyone else, has really committed and overcommitted its resources to Ukraine, meaning they're not going to be running to Taiwan's aid anytime soon because of that overcommitment to Ukraine. So if there was any good time to invade, this would be it, particularly since Biden's in office for less than 2 years to go.
Lisa Daftari also says the United States is sending another $2 billion worth of aid to Ukraine in its war with Russia. She'll have more coming up after business news. American researchers studying the records of 3.7 million adults found that long-term exposure to fine particulate air pollution is associated with an increased risk of heart conditions. They define long-term as a period of at least a year. Their findings add to existing evidence that the current regulatory standard for air pollution levels is not enough to protect people who live in areas with intense air pollution, creating adverse health events. You know, getting in shape is often a New Year's resolution for many of us, but as personal trainer Gavin Johnson shares, the benefits of an exercise routine far outweighs the physique. According to Johnson, an exercise routine will impact every aspect of a person's life.
Simply getting into the door and increasing that mental health by just lifting weight is huge. Another thing is if naturally you're kind of aggressive, getting in here and moving things around and taking it out in this place to move on to the rest of your life is huge. It's like taking a weight off your shoulder. And I see it time and time and time again that it has a direct correlation to the rest of your life. Business starts to succeed more. You start to have a better relationship with your significant other. You want to play with your kids. You want to move around with the grandkids. Anything like that. Like there's so much more than just coming here and working out. Like you said, that mental well-being is huge.
Be sure you catch the full interview with personal trainer Gavin Johnson and BCN producer Michael Clausen coming up the second half of our program. Well, the new Christian movie, The Jesus Revolution, has been beating box office projections. It was expected to earn around $7 million on its opening weekend, but instead brought in $15.5 million in its domestic box office debut. The movie is about a young Greg Laurie who in the 1970s was searching for all the right things in the wrong places until he meets a charismatic hippie street preacher by the name of Lonnie Frisbee. Together with Pastor Chuck Smith, portrayed by Kelsey Grammer, they open the doors of Smith's languishing church to an unexpected revival of radical and newfound love, leading to what Time magazine called the Jesus Revolution. So far, the film has received an incredible 99% audience rating compared with a 53% critic score. Additionally, Jesus Revolution has earned a rare A+ cinema score from opening day audiences. And we'll have more on the Jesus Revolution as we'll interview a director from the film. Watch for the Q&A with Jeanette Rocher coming up later this week on Bridge City News. Speaking of Jeanette, she'll be in shortly with a full look at the weather picture. And for southwestern Alberta, it is shaping up to be a very nice looking picture. Details are coming up shortly. It was so nice that we were closer to our seasonal values for this time of year for southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we shouldn't need a block heater this week here in Lethbridge?
Not this week, Hal. We are sitting at fairly seasonal averages for this time of year, and some days even beyond that. So looking into Tuesday, we're seeing a high of -3. We're going to be seeing possibility of 2 centimeters more of snow. Lots of sunshine, though, on Wednesday and Thursday, sitting at 2 degrees, and all the way up to 6 degrees is where we're jumping for Thursday. 3 degrees on Friday, sitting at 2 for Saturday, and then down to -7 on Sunday with a chance of snow there as well. So for the most part, we're staying above that. 3 degrees, the average high for this time of year, average low -9. 22 was our high temperature. Can you believe that in February back in 1992? I wish I was there now. -34 though, that was back in 1955. That was the coldest on record. Sun rose this morning at 7:19 and our sunset this evening at 6:09. We are now sitting at 10 hours and 50 minutes of daylight, almost 11 hours. Can you believe that? Okay, so both Victoria and Vancouver looking at 2 to 4 centimeters of flurries tomorrow, 4 degrees. The high in Victoria and Vancouver expecting a high of 5 degrees. -11 the high in Edmonton. Edmonton also looking at a 60% chance of flurries and 2 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Calgary with a high of -9. As we look to the rest of the prairies, a very high wind chill value expected in Saskatoon, looking at -31 with the wind chill there, but -12 is the high, mix of sun and cloud there. -9 the high in Regina and -7 in Winnipeg, and both of them also expecting wind chill with the risk of frostbite. So keep that in mind as well when you head out there. Toronto, we're looking at snow mixed with rain. Could see a risk of freezing drizzle there. 4 degrees the high there. A snowfall warning in effect for both Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow. Ottawa sitting at -1. They could see 10 to 15 centimeters of the white stuff tomorrow. Montreal sitting at 1 degree for a high, and they could see up to 10 centimeters of snow tomorrow. As we look to the Atlantic Canada, -5 in Fredericton expected, looking at a 60% chance of flurries there. -5 also in Halifax, but mainly sunny skies, seeing increasing clouds there. -6 the high in Charlottetown, and a 40% chance of flurries expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of -10. There you go. That's your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Huawei has expanded its footprint at the world's biggest wireless trade fair despite a geopolitical battle that left parts of its business crippled by Western sanctions. After 3 years of pandemic disruption, the Mobile World Congress kicked off in Barcelona, Spain. Mobile phone makers are showing off their new devices, and telecom executives are checking out the latest networking gear and software. Chinese companies led by Huawei are showcasing what they have to offer in the face of the company being blacklisted by Western countries over cybersecurity concerns. Also escalating tensions with the United States over TikTok, spy balloons, and computer chips. Nissan is speeding up its shift to electric vehicles, especially in Europe, where emissions regulations are more stringent. The automaker says it will make all of its offerings electric or series hybrids in Europe by fiscal 2026 at 98%. Nissan's sales target in EVs and series hybrids remains unchanged for the United States at around 40%. The targets underline the pace of the shift towards EVs by region. With North Korea facing a serious shortage of food, the country has reportedly opened a major political conference dedicated to agriculture. The North's official media committee will meet as members debate unspecified urgent tasks involving economic development. While experts have seen no signs of a famine in North Korea, they believe its current food shortage is the worst since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un took power in 2011. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 40 points on the day to finish at 20,260. The Dow was up 72 points to 32,889. The S&P 500 was up 12 on the day to 3982, and the Nasdaq was up 72 points to 11,466. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 58 cents to 75.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 17 cents to 2.72 US. Gold was down 7 cents to 18.1707 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $20.63 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.78 per bushel, barley's at $9.05, canola's at $18.73, and corn is at $11 per bushel. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $165. Feeder cattle March contract was up 10 cents to $189.18, and lean hogs April contract was down $1.30 to $84.73. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.65 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta is the latest province to sign an agreement in principle with the federal government on healthcare funding. Ottawa says the more than $24 billion will be invested in Alberta's healthcare system over the next decade. That includes an immediate top-up of $233 million to the Canada Health Transfer to address urgent needs. Alberta is the 7th province to sign on after the 4 Atlantic provinces, Ontario and Manitoba. You know, with all of the support the United States is giving Ukraine in its fight with Russia, there may not be much left over to support Taiwan if China decided to invade. That's according to our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who will explain in more details momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Discover how Lethbridge has played an important military role in the preservation of world peace and security by visiting the Lethbridge Military Museum at the Vimy Ridge Armory at the Lethbridge Airport. The museum is open to the public each Wednesday from noon to 4 p.m. Special arrangements for other days and times can be made by calling 403-328-6196. Admission is free, but donations are gratefully accepted. For more information, visit lethbridgemilitarymuseum.org. Lethbridge Sport Council's Indoor Roving Gyms program takes place Tuesdays at Emmanuel Lutheran Church from 6 to 7 p.m. and Thursdays at the Service Sports Center from 10 to 11 a.m. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. Pre-registration is required and space is limited. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
As tensions continue to rise between Israel and Tehran, the Jerusalem Post reported the type of military plane that could potentially strike nuclear facilities in Iran should Israel decide to take action against the Islamic Republic regime's nuclear program. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, could we potentially see a preventative strike by Israel?
we're already seeing them, but we're not seeing anything to the scale that would cause some sort of public reaction from Iran's regime. And what I mean by that is we've seen a series of almost clandestine hits, very targeted hits, right? So Israel is not looking to make this into any sort of escalation. What they're trying to do is twofold. A, deliver a message to Tehran that you're not going to develop a weapon, and if you are, you certainly aren't going to direct it in our direction. And B, they are hitting the facilities that are obviously more are progressing in the direction of creating that weapon. And for that reason, we're seeing them again very targeted and underground. The report by the Jerusalem Post talks about a potential strike on Iran's facilities underground should Israel feel like it needs to escalate to a place to absolutely take out their weapons program. We haven't seen that day come yet, but if they would, Israel is in possession of F-35 fighter jets that they got from the United States. A lot of lawmakers that are pro-Israel and have been advocating for Israel's defense, particularly against Iran's regime, have been advocating for Israel to have bunker busters that can go underground and get rid of these facilities in a much more smooth, for lack of a better word, way, and to really know that they have this in their arsenal and to have more security because of the fact. So that's the discussion right now. Obviously, Washington and Jerusalem are in talks. They are communicating more than we know. You know, the Obama administration didn't have a good relationship with Israel. Then you had Trump come in and he had a phenomenal relationship, not just with Israel, but personally with Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. And now Biden, although his foreign policy is very similar to the Obama foreign policy, he does have a better relationship with Israel. He is much more pro-Israel just in his own beliefs. And for that reason, although it's not as public, there is much more conversing back and forth between Israel and the United States. So there is absolute communication, and we'll have to watch and see what Israel deems as the next step in protecting themselves against the threat.
Absolutely. Lisa, the Revolutionary Guards commander says Iran has developed a cruise missile with a range of around 1,650 kilometers. That could definitely pose a threat.
Absolutely, to Israel, if for nothing else. I mean, obviously that's the small Satan, and the United States being the big Satan. Those are the two sworn enemies of Iran's regime. This is the crazy part, Hal. You have Iran right now, 5 months of Iranian people out on the streets protesting. That is the Achilles heel of this regime, knowing that the people want a revolution, the people want regime change. On the international stage, they're somewhat being sanctioned, although I know the European Union and the United States would have cold feet about really pushing the Iran regime hard. They would much rather sit down and appease them and get into a deal with them again, of course. But in the meantime, you're not seeing any good behavior by Iran's regime to warrant that kind of deal or appeasement. They're flexing their muscles. They're saying, look at our new weapons. Look at our uranium enrichment that has gone up from 60%, which was already a very high number, to about 84%, which was the report that we had last week. It's mind-boggling to think that any Western nation would believe that they can curb the behavior of this regime, that in this moment, they are actually showing bad behavior. It's like you're trying to punish a child, and instead of being very sorry and trying to change their behavior, they're showing more bad behavior. And that's exactly what we have here. So, you know, the European Union, the United States, the Iranian people are calling on them, a lot of lawmakers calling on them to really change their tune when it comes to Iran's regime, but yet they're very hesitant to do so.
The Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement claimed responsibility for an attack that killed 2 Israeli brothers on Sunday. Lisa, it was the same day the government of Jordan announced that officials from Israel and Palestine met to de-escalate tensions on the ground.
You know, the Palestinian lands and Israel met, and they basically, so you have the West Bank and Gaza, of course, you have Hamas in charge, and you have Mahmoud Abbas in charge, and then you have Israel. They all met in Jordan to discuss de-escalation, and both sides agreed that they do not want more casualties. And in the meantime, of course, you have these terror organizations, you know, every day they wake up, you know, wanting to kill more Jews. This is what they live off of. This is what gets them high. This is This is their entire existence. They cannot move forward if they get land, if they get water, if they get healthcare, if they get job. They cannot move forward. And you think about the challenge that Israel has to deal with these, who's in charge of them, right? So even if you're meeting with the leaders, you still have Palestinian Islamic Jihad, you still have members of Hamas, and you still have other Al-Aqsa Brigade and all of these other insurgencies that are, again, they have sworn to take out Jews every single day of their lives, and now they have guns. And before it was throwing guns and grenades and whatever that is in their possession, car rammings, take your car and just ram it into a bunch of Jews at a bus stop. So this is the challenge that is before them. But the one thing I will say is that if we want to connect the dots on your last question, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is directly funded by Iran's regime. So when the United States and the European Union sit there and they kind of twiddle their thumbs and don't know what to do with Iran's regime, this is what's going on. They are funding suicide bombers. They're funding these people. The people who, the gunmen who killed these two innocent young brothers, who is roaming free right now. Once he is found, he's a martyr. He's absolutely considered a hero, rather. And if a family loses a child that they do call a martyr, they get checks every single month from these organizations, pay to slay. And there were lawmakers in this country and in the United States that said we have to stop giving money to the Palestinian authorities because this is what they're doing with that money, whether it's going through UNRWA, the UN organization, or it's going through themselves. The aid that's going there is going towards this terrorism, and this is a prime example of that senseless bloodshed in that region, where two young brothers, a family, just really devastated over the weekend over nothing, over just pure hatred.
Pay to slay, unbelievable. Lisa, UK minister says criminal gangs hired by Iran are spying on British Jews and are preparing for potential assassination operations against prominent community members. Tell me more about that.
Right. So this brings it back to your first question about Israel potentially taking out very targeted targets inside Iran. And Iran came back and said, well, what we'll do is find Jews around the world and we will target them. So if we'll obviously start with the Jews inside Iran, and that community obviously dwindling, not too many Jews left there. But we'll move towards Israel, and we'll move towards Jews all over the world, and we will support targeted attacks on them. So the UK, this was a leaked investigation where they found out that UK Jews were under surveillance. They were basically mapping them out, where they are, where they hang out, where their synagogues are, where their places of work and residence are, and that they will target them that way. Whether this is intimidation or this is true, this is horrific. No one in this world is safe until this regime is removed, and that's actually the case that we're seeing here. Their tentacles reach very far and wide, and they're supporting terror in the United States. I know that Canada has a huge issue with many of them infiltrating there, finding haven in Canada, and then being outed. And I know the Canadian government decided to get rid of any tentacles of the Iran regime, particularly the family members of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard. But I have not heard of one name of one individual that has been thrown out of the country who has been asked to move. And we know that they set up in Toronto, in Vancouver. These are places that they love to live and frequent and have homes in, second homes in. But that's what's going on. The tentacles of Iran's regime are reaching everywhere. Their money, their influence, their terrorism is spreading all over the world.
You know, it's not often that the Democrats and Republicans agree on anything, but lawmakers from both parties agree on blaming China for the worldwide fentanyl crisis. They say the Asian nation has been helping to fuel the ongoing crisis for many years now.
Yes. So prior to this latest news story, the Democrats have always been fearful of putting too much pressure on China for fear of political retaliation, right? Wanting to work together with China, wanting to make nice with China, particularly in light of more recent developments. Now they've realized that this kindness to China is not getting us anywhere, and the fentanyl crisis is absolutely out of control. So finally, we have bipartisan support on something that's very important in Washington. Perhaps a little too late, Hal, when you have fentanyl in all of our suburbs reaching all the way up to Canada. I know that we have an issue of this pass along scenario, but all throughout the suburbs of the United States, you have record number of teens and preteens dying of overdose. These are kids who are trying things for the very first time, and they think something is very, kind of benign and trying to, experiment with it and end up dying in overdoses. They're finally cracking down, whether it was China getting the fentanyl to the border or now getting the ingredients to the Mexican cartels, and then they're making the fentanyl and passing it through. Regardless, it is spreading like wildfire, and it has to stop. So if we finally have some bipartisan support on this, but again, what will this this warning, this stern warning to China really do? We shall see.
A chief with the CIA says he doubts that China will actually invade Taiwan, even though China's President Xi Jinping instructed his military to be ready to invade the country by the year 2027. Now, Lisa's CIA Director William Burns says, I doubt it's going to happen. Why do you think he says that?
It's interesting because when it comes to China, we should watch their actions and not their words, not even their words. I mean, their hesitations, as President Biden and now the CIA chief have said. So President Biden met with Chinese President Xi Jinping about 3 months ago for about 3 hours. He walked out of the meeting, and if you read the meeting notes, the big takeaway was, I don't think they're going to be invading Taiwan. Well, right after that, we saw them beefing up their assets. We saw them doing drills around Taiwan. We saw them really provoking or at least leading up to an invasion of Taiwan. And now in recent months, we have seen other things. Just today, China decided to sanction Boeing and some other companies for selling to Taiwan. They also have been obviously provoking with military drills and trying to get over airspace in Taiwan. And that sounds like, it looks like a pre-invasion, but I mean, who am I to make some sort of observation like that? It's interesting to watch what this administration does in terms of just going around in circles from, the White House spokesperson. It's just a joke every single day. We are behind the news. We are behind Twitter. We are behind anyone like you and I having this conversation. I mean, it's very irresponsible for our administration to have such poor messaging to tell people, it's not going to be a threat, when in fact it will be a threat. And what is the CIA chief basing his assessments of China not invading Taiwan on? Well, he thinks that when China is meeting with Russia, as they are, they're looking to how difficult this invasion of Ukraine has been, and then they're going to get cold feet and say, it's not going to be worth it. I think the Chinese are a bit more brave than that, but we shall see.
Lisa, it sounds like the United States is committing more money to Ukraine to support Zelensky's war with Russia. Following the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Biden administration has committed $2 billion in drones, ammunition, and aid to the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, speaking of failed invasions, here you go, right? A year into this, and there's no end in sight. And the United States, for some reason, feels like we have to commit more and more and more to this. One of the reasons China should, if I were a crazy Chinese dictator, I would say you should invade Taiwan right now. Why? Because the Europeans and the United States, more than anyone else, has really committed and overcommitted its resources to Ukraine, meaning they're not going to be running to Taiwan's aid anytime soon because of that overcommitment to Ukraine. So if there was any good time to invade, this would be it, particularly since Biden's in office for less than 2 years to go. So that is why a lot of people like myself have their eyes on Taiwan and watching the clock until that happens. But as to why we are committing and recommitting more and more money and resources, Zelensky keeps asking for it, and Biden keeps saying yes, some sort of love affair. He visited Ukraine just last week. He visited Ukraine before he visited East Palestine with all of this wreckage and one of the biggest hazmat disasters that we've had in our history here in the United States, hesitated to go down to the southern border. I mean, we have so many crises in this country. If you're a family of 4 and you can't put food on the table because of the recession we're having, you're not looking to President Biden saying, thank God he went over to Ukraine, and thank God he's giving more weapons and money to Zelensky. So it's bad optics for this White House, that's for sure, bad optics for the president, but we shall see where this war is going and where Putin wants to take it next.
Absolutely. She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk from Los Angeles. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Physical fitness is a goal for many of us, yet it can seem hard to stay dedicated and motivated while on the quest. At times, it can even be a challenge to see the results so many of us want to see from our time at the gym. That desire for fitness can be like the personal version of the hero's journey we see in so many movies and other stories. But joining me today is a friend and fitness trainer to talk about succeeding at our own quest to become a fitter and stronger version of ourselves. Gavin Johnson is a personal trainer and a fixture at the Gym of the North here in Lethbridge. Gavin, welcome to Bridge City News.
How are you doing?
Great. Glad to have you on. I got to ask you, I would think that staying motivated at the gym is probably the #1 hurdle to overcome. What tips can you recommend for maintaining that motivation that we need?
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that time and time again. It's usually the hardest thing to overcome is just staying motivated. A few things you can do is just kind of changing the words for yourself too, is starting to find something that's a little more disciplined in your daily routine and stuff like that. A couple big things that you can do is find a gym partner. Anyone in your area that wants to go or is already going to the gym, go with them, go alongside them, or start this journey with a friend, family member, significant other. You can do things like hiring a personal trainer and a coach if you have the money to be able to do that kind of thing, for sure. That's a huge accountability partner in that sense. And then everything else that you can do to stay motivated is track your progress. You can do things like taking your weights and measurements and stuff, but the #1 way to do it is take pictures. If you have some sort of physique related goal with going to the gym, definitely track your progress over time. Take pictures. You don't have to show anyone. Even if you hire a coach, we don't all require to see your pictures. Take some pictures so you can see, after you've been going consistently for 8 weeks, some difference in yourself that way too.
Right. So I got to ask you, what about tips for somebody, because you're talking about writing down, maybe actually making a fitness routine in like a journal or a scrapbook or something?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing too, is tracking your progress in a sense like that. Write down what you've done. Look at weights you've lifted over time, journal the experience, even going home and debriefing on a session. Hey, today went awesome. Had a new PR on my squat, had a really good conversation with a friend at the gym today, felt very motivated, excelled at my intended things to do at the gym. And then, like you said, the other thing is too, is have some sort of routine when you're going. Don't just go free ball it and wing it. You can go online and search exercise program and 1,000 come up, and just try one of them. Or like I said, that's where you can branch into going farther and hiring someone too.
Yeah, and I know sometimes we can maybe put too much pressure on ourselves. So what would you say is a first place to start? You mentioned the Gym Buddy, and a program, but is there something else that you would say this is the primary place to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, like the place you want to start is just by simply showing up. Just come inside. Another thing you can do is just come to the gym. Like I said, having a gym partner is huge, but even if you just leave work and show up in front of the doors, and you don't even have to come in, just starting to set yourself with that routine that way too. Vibes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I suppose for some, the cost might be a little bit of a prohibiting factor, especially if you want to get into that coaching and training side. But can you put into words maybe the benefits of a physical fitness program in terms of payoff being greater than, let's say, your gym membership is, I don't know, 10 Happy Meals or something like that?
Yeah, so and on that front, there's a lot of benefits to hiring someone. They know what they're doing. That's is simply put, right? They've spent their time and their own money doing this kind of thing. So, like, if you've got that availability to be able to invest into it, I highly recommend it. Yeah, like I said, we've poured our time, effort, our own personal finances into doing this, continuing with our education. We've went to school, all that kind of stuff too. So huge benefits that way. Kind of saves you that point of guess and check. You get over that hurdle without having to guess for months and months on end and wonder if you're making progress too. So very much trained eye.
That's perfect. I think a perfect way to look at it. Let's say that I was bringing in a friend or a family member to see you at the gym, and they were total novice. Where would you start them out? Maybe is there a machine or something? What it would be that first exercise that we would start my friend with?
So I usually start off by just a couple of questions, finding out if you have any injuries and limitations. And let's just say on this sense, there's none. Lots of this kind of stuff, it always depends, but most of the time I'm going to start you in some kind of machine somewhere in the gym. I want to get an idea of how you move. I'm going to throw you on a piece of cardio equipment for a few minutes, get you moving, get talking to you, get to know you a little bit. This is assuming we've had a consultation already in the past to come in and BS a little bit as well. But then we're going to move into the gym and we're going to start playing around with stuff. I'm going to probably start off by asking if you've used anything in the gym. If there's something you've been on, we're immediately going to go to that. You're going to have some sort of comfort. You've been on this machine, you've moved with it. We're going to fix your form and everything else and then move on from there. And I usually, 9 times out of 10, I start off with all machines. This is going to teach you how to move with proper biomechanics and stuff that way as well. You're not just guessing. There's a lot of what's called external stabilization. That machine is holding you in place. If you're using a chest press, you can't manipulate how them handles are moving around. They move in one direction only, right? So that's usually where I'll start, is finding some machines you've used or comfortable with. And if there's nothing, I'll start us off on the easiest possible machine we can start with that way too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's really important that people manage their own expectations. And one of the reasons why probably going with a friend or getting a coach is really helpful to get into it. And I know for me that physical fitness can be like mind over mattress, so to speak, of just getting up and doing it, getting your foot in the door. And it sounds like we talked about journaling, so goal setting is probably a key factor here. Can you talk about the use of goals, maybe in helping set your clients up to succeed?
Yeah, so there's lots with goals. To break it down is find out what you want to do and why you're there. That's always step number 1. Like, have an idea in mind. If you're going to the gym for mental well-being, having more energy, that's one thing, but you can also have like the physique related stuff where you want to lose weight, build muscle for confidence, anything like that. I think a big point to touch on when setting goals is talk to a professional that have seen people in your exact shoes. We've seen people going through the same process, similar to yourself. Tell us your goals, tell us what you're wanting to achieve. And then from there, we can kind of guide you along that path too. But just find where your passion lays and what you want to do. Sometimes like I said, it's just physique related, but sometimes it could even be like setting routine and trying to become more in depth with doing different things. That can correlate over to business, to personal life, to work life, everything in that front too. So just find what you want to do, and just kind of move forward from there. Talk to people, express your goals with people. Another thing is to write that goal down. You can write it down so every morning you see it. One thing I've had clients do in the past, write a goal down, put it on your door. And if you close your door at night, every day when you wake up and you leave, it sounds simple and dumb, but you have to read through that. It's an immediate reminder of what you're trying to do and how you can go about achieving that goal is its own scenario, but that first step has been made. There's something you want to do that way. So
yeah. Exactly. Well, that writing that vision down and making it plain, that statement is even in the Bible. So it's an idea as old as time itself. Put it on a piece of paper, put it on your mirror in your bathroom or your door before you go out to work, and you're seeing that. So let's say, for an example, practical example, you and I actually talked about this last week. Somebody who comes in and says, Gavin, I need to do a pull-up. That's what I've written down on my sheet of paper. Please help me. What is the plan that you would suggest for his success or her success?
So the number one thing, we're going to go directly in with a pull-up here. Regress to progress, right? So find out where you are in that pull-up and go backwards. If you can't even hang from the bar, first thing, you have to improve that grip strength to be able to hang from the bar. The next step, if you're not strong enough to pull yourself up in any way, shape, or form, find a way that you can. You don't even have to start with doing any sort of that actual work, like just going through the motion of learning how to pull yourself up to a bar. Okay, that step has been made. Now move on to a cable system where you can grab a wide bar, mimic that movement, start moving through it, get stronger in that movement pattern. Then from there, take your more direct steps of moving into something like an assisted pull-up machine where it's going to take body weight off for you, but now you're doing a direct pull-up. You're pulling yourself up to that bar. And then same thing, take another step from there, grab a band, start doing that pull-up on an actual bar. And then before you know it, it might take you 3 years to get there, but staying consistent and regressing as far as you have to before you just start trying to do it, then boom, all of a sudden, just like that, you're doing a couple pull-ups in a row. So I think that's a big one, is just looking at where you currently stand in your goal and what obstacles are between you and achieving that goal. The biggest thing being, like I said, regress all the way backwards, find a starting point, and then just move on from there.
Right.
So,
and folks at home, this is why you need a gym buddy or a helper. So if somebody, Gavin, wants to hire a coach at the gym, there must be a checklist or some criteria that people need to think about selecting that coach. What do they look for?
so there's a lot. I think the first thing you're going to want to ask yourself, do you connect with that person? Can you sit down and have a conversation, be open with them? Like very commonly, they can be an amazing coach, but you can't sit and have a 5-minute conversation and express your goals. There's no way you guys are gonna work together. That coach, if they're a good coach and good at what they do, they will refer you to someone. Most commonly being is just trying to find someone that you can work with. Then the next step from there is get to know them a little bit. What is their experience in the industry? Do they walk the walk? That's a big one to ask yourself. Is this coach just someone that's going to give me a plan and tell me what to do? Or do they have experience working with people and want to actually educate me to my goal? I think that's a big one that people got to look for is a coach just giving you a plan, or are they trying to teach you how to succeed over time? Because the ultimate goal, myself being a coach and trainer, is I don't want to work with someone for years on end. I want to be able to teach you enough information so that you can move into some point to being able to be autonomous with it. Don't get me wrong. I love working with people for a very long period of time, especially if it's sport related. But that's a big thing. And then, do they have success in the industry? Ask them, have they worked with people in your situation? If they say no, ask them deeper questions of what do you think they would need to do? Just start to get to know them and see if their ideals fit your needs yourself. And another thing to remember is just because this is what they do as a profession doesn't always mean it's going to be the right fit. Like I said, we're going to circle back to number one. Can you connect with that person on a personal level? If that answer is yes, same thing. Start asking more questions, get to know them, and move on from there.
Right.
So
that's great. I appreciate that input. And I asked that question because not everybody would think I should do a little bit of a deep dive into my connection with this person, right? Let's move on to the benefits on our mental health and wellness that going to the gym provides for us. I know I was reading in some research for this just about the happy molecules that come from when our muscles are contracted, and we could talk for hours on that, I'm sure. But I know for myself, I like to say my 12-step program is actually a stair climber. But I got to ask you, talk to us about what you have seen as the positive changes to mindset and increased mental wellness from going to the gym.
This is probably the biggest thing I see. So when you're going into the gym, usually people are coming in physique related. What they're not going to realize is the amount of mental health benefits you're going to get from this. Biggest one being routine outside of the gym. If you can get into that routine of making it to the gym, taking that step in, all of a sudden that's going to start to correlate into the rest of your life. Like I had mentioned before, you're going to get a better personal life. Your work life is going to increase. And these aren't even going to be things that you're trying to work on. Just having that mental clarity is huge. All of a sudden, you're getting out of bed 10 minutes earlier. And then all of a sudden, you want to start diving into your nutrition. Don't do all these at the same time, but simply getting into the door and increasing that mental health by just lifting weight is huge. Another thing is too, is if naturally you're kind of aggressive, getting in here and moving things around and taking it out in this place to move on to the rest of your life is huge. It's like taking a weight off your shoulder. And I see it time and time and time again that it has a direct correlation to the rest of your life. Business starts to succeed more. You start to have a better relationship with your significant other. You want to play with your kids. You want to move around with the grandkids. Anything like that. Like there's so much more than just coming here and working out.
It really is true. That exercise routine, I know we were talking about physically going to a gym. That's just a great thing for accountability and gaining relationships with like-minded people. But you're right, it has a snowball effect, a positive effect on every part of our life. And Gavin, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I really appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And I'm Michael Clausen for all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.